Okay, so if you stand right now in a major Australian city, think Circular Quay in Sydney, maybe one of the Melbourne's Dizzy Laneways, the very first thing you notice is just this visual riot.
Mhm.
You see everything. People with like ice blue eyes right next to someone with these rich, dark curls and golden brown skin. You get these tall, sort of Nordic-looking people mixing with, more compact East Asian builds.
Yeah, it's immediately striking.
It really is just a stunning, immediate display of diversity. And today, that's what we're doing a deep dive into. We're looking at the sources that explain this physical reality.
Right.
And the core scientific finding we dug into, it confirms this big paradox.
Hmm.
Australia's very unique look comes from being both incredibly ancient, its indigenous history, and astonishingly young in its immigrant makeup.
That paradox is absolutely key. It's the lens for looking at this material. We're examining how over 60,000 years of continuous culture has sort of layered itself with just 250 years of really rapid global migration.
60,000 years versus 250. That's
Yeah.
quite the contrast.
Yeah. It's huge. And this blending, this mix of deep time and very recent history, that's what physically defines the country now.
Okay, so let's frame that for our listeners.
Okay. So you have Aboriginal Australians, their culture. It's the world's oldest known continuous one. We're talking well over 60,000 years.
Mind-boggling, really.
It is. Now, contrast that deep history with the data today. We found that over 29% of Australians are actually foreign-born.
Wow, nearly a third.
Yeah, and get this. More than half, over 50%, have at least one parent who was born overseas.
So the majority of the population has recent immigrant roots.
Exactly. That level of genetic mixing and immigration, it's almost unparalleled globally.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with skin tone seems logical because the spectrum here is, well, it's vast.
It really is. Our sources confirm skin color in Australia literally spans nearly every shade. Any attempt to generalize is just absurd.
Right.
And that diversity, it's deeply rooted in climate adaptation. Think about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the first Australians. They tend to display high melanin levels.
Melanin being the natural pigment, the protector.
Precisely. And these high levels are a perfect genetic adaptation to the continent's frankly brutal UV exposure.
Yeah.
Genetic studies put those levels on par with populations, say, near the equator.
Okay, so that's the ancient adaptation layer. Then you add the mass immigration layers on top.
Exactly. So around 75% of current Australians trace their heritage back to Europe. That gives you that whole range, from very fair, sun-sensitive skin right through to those robust Mediterranean olive tones.
75% is still a large majority from Europe.
It is, historically speaking. But then you add the enormous contribution from Asian Australians. That's over 17% of the population now.
Bringing in those distinctive golden and beige hues we see everywhere.
Yep. And then there are significant Middle Eastern communities, too, contributing these warmer, sort of deep olive tones. It's complete physical mosaic.
Mosaic, but one that, as you mentioned, is historically fraught.
Absolutely. And that historical context is critical here. It brings us to a point found in the sources that's politically charged. Historically, under the White Australia policy, which is now abolished, of course, fair skin wasn't just, preferred.
It was legally privileged,
Yeah.
an instrument of exclusion.
It was. But if you look at modern culture, it's fascinating because that ideal has almost completely flipped. Tanning culture is pervasive.
Oh, definitely.
Sources show over 60% of young Australians actively prefer bronzed, tanned skin.
Which sparks this whole debate, right?
Yeah.
Is it just aesthetics maybe seen as healthier or more suited to the climate?
Or, as some argue, is it sort of prioritizing a non-European look without fully acknowledging the non-European heritage that, actually made that look common here in the first place? It's a real point of friction.
That's a really complex cultural shift happening fast. Aesthetics changing quicker than genetics. But if we shift to something genetically fixed, like eye color, the European legacy is still very visible there, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because of that heavy initial European migration, especially from Britain and Ireland, Australia has an incredibly high incidence of light eyes. Researchers estimate a huge chunk, over 25% of Australians, have blue eyes.
25%, compared to less than 10% globally.
Exactly. It's very high. And you add maybe another 20% with green or hazel eyes.
Okay, so light eyes are very common. But wait, if we're trying to counter that stereotype, the sort of blue-eyed surfer image, the data actually shows dark brown eyes are still dominant, right? Making up nearly half the population.
Precisely. The stereotype is, well, statistically misleading. Dark brown eyes are very common across Asian, Middle Eastern, and Indigenous Australians.
So brown eyes are still the most common single color.
Correct. But it's the visual contrast that makes the country so striking, you see. You can be anywhere, any public place, and see classmates or colleagues with these piercing ice blue eyes sitting right next to people with rich, deep brown eyes.
And the key takeaway is,
The key is that both are fundamentally Australian. It's like a genetic handshake between the ancient populations and the modern migrations.
right. Okay, let's move to hair. The sources mention texture ratios. About 60% straight, 30% wavy, 10% curly. Pretty standard range.
Yeah, the texture isn't wildly unusual, but the color variation, again, tells the story. That strong European inheritance means around 12 to 15% of the population is naturally blonde.
Which is remarkably high compared to most non-European derived nations.
It is, and red hair, often linked to Celtic ancestry, that shows up in about 4% too. Fairly significant.
But I found this fascinating, one of the most surprising facts we pulled from these sources was about indigenous hair, specifically Aboriginal children in certain regions.
Ah, yes. Particularly in some central desert regions, they often display naturally blonde hair in childhood, which usually darkens as they get older.
And this isn't just like a result of historical mixing with Europeans.
No, absolutely not. This is a genuine genetic anomaly, and it's one of the deepest insights into that ancient part of the Australian paradox we talked about.
How so?
Geneticists stress this blondism is caused by an entirely different gene variant. It's not the same gene that causes blonde hair in Europeans.
A completely separate genetic pathway.
Completely separate. A unique mutation, incredibly rare globally. It's powerful proof, a genetic fingerprint showing this population evolved independently, isolated from global gene flow for tens of thousands of years.
Wow. So that distinct blondism really underscores the deep, long history.
It absolutely does. It confirms that 60,000 plus year timeline in a very direct way.
Okay, moving from surface features like hair and eyes, let's look underneath its structure. Height and build. Australians consistently rank among the tallest globally, right? Up there with Northern Europeans.
The numbers confirm it. Average Aussie male, about 179 centimeters, so 5'10.5". Average female, 165 centimeters, about 5'5". That is tall by global standards.
But again, that average must hide significant variation from migration.
Of course. Asian Australians, for instance, tend to average shorter statures, maybe closer to 171 centimeters for men, for example.
And what about historical indigenous builds?
Yeah, looking back, historical accounts and studies suggest Aboriginal populations often had slightly shorter stature compared to Europeans, but were noted for having extremely robust, powerful builds, really adapted for endurance for traversing these vast, tough landscapes.
Which brings us to a major modern influence on body structure, something overriding even those adaptations: lifestyle. The sources flagged a pretty concerning statistic.
Yes, a major one. In 2022, a startling 67% of Australian adults were classified as overweight or obese.
2/3, that's huge.
It's huge. And this is where ancient adaptation crashes head-on into the modern world. That statistic is crucial because it shows how modern, often westernized diets and, frankly, more sedentary living are dramatically influencing body structure.
More than the historical climate-driven adaptation sometimes.
Exactly. It sparks this enormous national health debate about the shift away from traditional active ways of life towards more Western patterns of consumption and living.
So the modern Australian build is changing rapidly because of diet and environment, even while the facial structures still clearly tell that story of ancient lineage meeting modern migration.
Precisely. If we look at those ancient features again, Aboriginal Australians often show distinct characteristics, things like broader nasal bridges, strong brow ridges, often more rounded jawlines, features honed over millennia for the conditions here.
And Torres Strait Islanders.
They often have stronger Melanesian ancestry links, so you might see features like fuller lips, perhaps higher cheekbones more commonly.
Okay, contrast those ancient adapted features with the newer angles brought by migration, European features.
Typically involve narrower noses, maybe more angular jawlines on average.
And Asian features.
Often present softer contours, and epicanthic folds are common.
Epicanthic folds, that's the skin fold over the inner corner of the eye.
That's the one. Very characteristic in many East Asian populations. And then Middle Eastern Australians often contribute, say, sharper profiles, maybe darker, thicker eyebrows typically.
So you have all these different features, literally side by side, which creates this fundamental paradox in national identity, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because there is clearly no single Australian look in reality.
Yeah.
Yet media And maybe global perception often pushes that very narrow stereotype, the blonde, tanned, surf culture image.
And that narrow portrayal isn't just inaccurate, it can be actively harmful. It raises real controversy about true representation. It essentially ignores the tens of thousands of years of the original inhabitants, and it downplays the massive, more recent waves of Asian and Middle Eastern immigration.
So the blend is the reality today.
Absolutely. Think about that sensory summary again. Picture their Bondi Beach on a summer day.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got the tanned lifeguards. The stereotype exists for a reason. But they are right there next to Aboriginal surfers with that deep, sun-darkened skin. You've got families of Asian heritage setting up picnics next to Middle Eastern Australians playing beach soccer. That blending is visible everywhere now, in every crowd, every face, every shade.
And this connects back to overcoming historical injustice, doesn't it? Appearance, physical difference, was once the tool used to justify awful policies.
Exactly. Things like the stolen generations or citizenship requirements heavily favoring whiteness. Physical difference was weaponized.
So connecting this to the bigger picture today, the reality is the complete opposite. Diversity isn't some exception anymore. It is the national feature. We really need to actively counter that outdated global stereotype of just the fair-skinned colonial descendant.
And that counter-narrative is right there in the real faces of modern Australia on the global stage. Think of tennis star Nick Kyrgios, Greek and Malaysian heritage.
Right. Or singer Jessica Mauboy, Indigenous and Timorese descent.
Or supermodel Aduda Kek, a South Sudanese refugee raised in Adelaide. None of them fit that narrow old mold. They represent the actual Australia.
And crucially, this isn't just us looking around and saying it looks diverse. The sources back this up with hard data.
Yes, absolutely. There was a 2017 Global Ancestry report cited that actually confirmed Australia as one of the top 5 most genetically mixed nations globally, right up there with the US and Canada.
So the diversity we see isn't just social, it's genetic reality.
It is. So the final synthesis here is pretty clear, I think. Australia's physical appearance today is a total mosaic. You've got these ancient genetic lineages sustained for millennia, dramatically mixed with very recent, very global migration.
That tension, or maybe that fusion between old and new, is imprinted on every face.
Exactly.
And what a powerful identity that blend creates. Physical difference was, as we said, historically used for exclusion. But today, that very blend defines the country's modern character, its place in the world.
Well put.
So we've looked at the genes, the history, the skin, the eyes, the build, the whole modern paradox. But the conversation really continues for you, our listener. Who defines what it means to truly look Australian today? Is it still that lingering surfer stereotype? Is it the deep 60,000-year Indigenous heritage? Or is it the vibrant multicultural mix you see on the street right now? What face comes to your mind when you hear the word Australian? Something to reflect on until our next deep dive.